Hi, my name is Lauren Avery, middle child, quiet one, the independent daughter who never needed anything, until the moment I did and no one showed up. This year I came home for Thanksgiving because I wanted to believe things might have changed. I told myself people grow, families grow, they don't. I arrived at my parents' house at 4:37 p.m., cranberry tart still warm in my hands, a bottle of wine tucked under my arm. It was the same Chardonnay my mom used to call her relaxation ritual before she started pretending she never drank. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there in her favorite ivory sweater and a smile that looked photo-ready but didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you made it." She paused just long enough to let the subtext land. "We weren't sure after last year." I didn't respond. She stepped aside and I walked in. The house smelled like lemon disinfectant and cinnamon candles. Clean, forced, like it was trying too hard to forget something. As I passed the entry table, I noticed it. The new family photo in a gold frame. My brother Ethan and his wife, their 2 boys. My parents, smiling beside them. I wasn't in it, not even cropped out. Just never included. "Put the tart in the kitchen, sweetheart," Mom called over her shoulder. "You're at the den table this year. More guests than expected." I froze. "The den?" She didn't flinch. "We set it up real nice. You'll love it. Cozy." I walked into the dining room anyway. The main table was already set, candles flickering, cloth napkins folded into swans, gold-rimmed plates aligned like compass points. There were 14 seats, all full, all labeled. Ethan and his wife Alicia sat beside my dad. Their kids had booster seats. My uncle, my cousin, even Alicia's Pilates instructor had a name card. Mine wasn't there. "Where exactly is this cozy table?" I asked. "In the den, sweetie," she said, as if she were offering a spa upgrade. I turned and found it. A wobbly card table shoved next to the TV, a single folding chair, plastic utensils, paper napkin that read, "Gobble till you wobble." Baxter, the family dog, was already curled up underneath. I stood there a moment, then sat. My knees hit the table's edge. The chair creaked. Baxter farted and sighed. Ethan popped in with a tumbler of whiskey. "Nice setup, huh? You always liked your space." I looked up. "I wasn't aware I needed to be quarantined." He grinned. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. You always bail anyway." "I bailed because you told me not to come." He chuckled. "We didn't say not to come. We just thought it might be better if you took time for yourself." "Right. Because in this house, asking for space was called selfish, but exiling someone was called love." Dinner was a script I'd already memorized. Dad bragged about Ethan's new job interviews. He's got offers lined up at 3 investment firms. Might land at Bell and Whitaker. Big-time stuff. Mom beamed like she'd birthed a CEO. No one asked what I did. No one asked how my startup was going. No one asked about the 2 angel rounds I'd closed this fall, or the quiet 7-figure acquisition offer sitting in my inbox. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the chandelier above the dining room, listening to them talk about my brother's natural business instincts. After dessert, my mother approached me. Her hands were busy with napkins, her voice syrupy. "Could you help with dishes? Everyone's tired." I looked up slowly. "I've built a company from scratch," I said. 30 employees, 2 international clients, and I was seated next to a dog. She blinked. "Oh, Lauren, don't turn everything into a moment." I stood, pulled an envelope from my coat. "What's that?" Ethan asked, walking over. "Nothing," I said, and handed it to him. "Just some feedback." He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the Bell and Whitaker logo, and a note. "We've reviewed your background and, based on internal advisory feedback, will not be proceeding with your application." He paled. "What did you do?" I didn't answer, just grabbed my coat. At the door, Mom called out, "Are you seriously leaving already?" I turned my head just slightly. "You gave me the smallest chair in the house. What did you expect, gratitude?" And then I walked out, calm, quiet, like someone who no longer needed to be invited to take up space. Would you have stayed for the pie, or walked out while the candles were still lit? The wind outside hit harder than I expected. My coat wasn't zipped. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from restraint. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. That kind of exit only works if someone's watching, and no one was. I slid into my car and just sat there, the engine off, head against the steering wheel, breath fogging the windshield. The silence was louder than any yelling I could have done inside. There was so much I didn't say, like how Bell and Whitaker reached out to me directly last week. Not through a recruiter, through a closed-door advisory board I sit on. Ethan's application was flagged during a background review, not because he'd lied, but because he had no substance. I didn't blacklist him. I didn't have to. All I did was decline to recommend. Sometimes revenge doesn't require fire. Sometimes it just takes clarity. Still, something in me cracked when I saw that folding table, because it wasn't just the insult. It was the confirmation of everything I already knew. I drove for almost an hour with no destination. Somewhere between the traffic lights and the quiet jazz playing from my Bluetooth, my tears came. Not loud, not cinematic. Just hot, slow, tired. I thought about that word again. Distant. That's what Mom called me. The irony is, I used to be the one always close. Back when I was in high school, I'd bake every Thanksgiving dish by hand, hoping someone would notice. Back when Ethan was too hungover to lift a finger and still got thanked for showing up. When I got into college on scholarship, Dad said, "Smart move, going cheap." When Ethan flunked out of 2 majors, they paid for a 3rd. They told people I worked in tech stuff. They told people Ethan had a future in leadership. And when I launched my company from a sublet apartment with 3 secondhand monitors and ramen-fueled resolve, I didn't tell them, because they wouldn't have asked, and if they did, it would have ended in comparison. Again. I pulled over near the waterfront. There was a little diner still open. I ordered coffee, black, and took the booth near the window where I could watch the harbor lights shiver. That's when my phone buzzed. Mom, don't be childish, you made things weird. Ethan, whatever game you're playing, you crossed a line. Dad, nothing, as usual. And then something unexpected. Alicia, I know it wasn't fair, I saw it, I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because it moved me, but because it stunned me. No one ever broke ranks in that family. Not once. The next morning, I woke up to an inbox full of silence, which, ironically, told me everything. No apology, no explanation, no one asking why I left early, just a subtle effort to sweep it under the rug. I knew the pattern. I'd lived inside it long enough. It's the kind of family that mistakes forgiveness for forgetting and expects you to do both. I didn't. By Monday, Ethan's LinkedIn status had quietly changed. The Bell and Whitaker job he'd been bragging about? Gone. Scrubbed. Not a word about it. Instead, a vague post, excited about new opportunities ahead. The spin was familiar. What they didn't know was that I'd already forwarded his application to 3 other firms I had ties with. Not to destroy him, just to let them know. This candidate lacks follow-through and leadership under pressure. Was it ruthless? Maybe. But here's the thing about surviving a family that never lets you speak. You learn how to be heard without raising your voice. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of spectacle. I wanted consequence. Because for years, I carried their guilt like a second skin. I shrank myself to fit their story, made myself quiet, easy, low maintenance. But this wasn't about me being the bigger person anymore. It was about being the right one. That night, I opened the file I'd kept hidden on my desktop. Thanksgiving receipts. It had years' worth of screenshots, emails, text messages, Venmo transfers from me to Mom when she said the mortgage was tight, receipts for groceries I sent to their address, a letter where Dad told me I owed the family for not attending Ethan's engagement party the week my business nearly went under. I didn't plan to use it, not yet, but I wasn't going to delete it either. I met with my team the next day. We were preparing a quiet acquisition of a smaller analytics firm, a project I'd been leading for months. At the end of the meeting, Maya, my operations lead, pulled me aside. "You good?" she asked. I paused. "You ever feel like the only way to be seen is to burn everything down?" She gave me that look, the kind women give each other when the words go unspoken. "Start with a match," she said. "Then see who notices the smoke." I smiled for the first time in days. Later that night, I got a voicemail. It wasn't from Mom or Ethan. It was from my Aunt Rachel, Mom's estranged younger sister. Lauren, I heard what happened. I haven't been invited to Thanksgiving in 7 years either. But if you need somewhere to go next time, my table's got space. For you, and anyone else who's tired of pretending. I didn't cry, but I played that message 3 times. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. Ever had someone say, "That's just how families are," and expect you to swallow it? Just curious. By Wednesday, the group chat was active again. Not with apologies, not with reflection, but with logistics. Mom posted a blurry photo of the leftover stuffing. Alicia dropped a Pinterest link titled, "Elegant Holiday Centerpieces." Ethan shared a meme about ungrateful siblings ruining holidays. I didn't respond. I didn't even mute it. I wanted to watch them flail. At the office, things were different. I walked into our weekly leadership sync with a black coffee and the clarity of someone who had nothing left to prove. Maya gave me a quiet nod. She didn't ask questions. She never had to. We were preparing to close our biggest client yet, a health data conglomerate trying to revamp their consumer insights. I'd spent the past month pitching, reshaping, and revising proposals until the language landed perfectly. In the middle of the call, one of the junior analysts chimed in, hesitant. "Lauren, did you want to include your name on the final presentation deck?" The board rep asked who the founder was. I paused. It was an easy question, but I hadn't used my name on the front-facing materials in almost 2 years, not since I realized the weight it carried in the wrong circles. My last name, Avery. The same one etched on plaques in Dad's old law firm. The same one Ethan was still coasting on. "No," I said. "Leave it anonymous for now. Let the product speak." He nodded. Maya didn't flinch, because she knew what I really meant. Let the work earn the credit, not the name, not the bloodline. That night I got a text from my cousin Matt. "So, heard you torpedoed Ethan's Bell offer. Bold." I replied. "He torpedoed himself. I just declined to swim after him." Matt and I weren't close, but we were similar. Both too observant, too sarcastic, too inconvenient for family dinners. He'd left the state 5 years ago and rarely came back. "You ever think we're the only ones who know how fake it all is?" he wrote. I stared at the message, then typed, "Knowing isn't the hard part. Pretending you don't. That's the killer." He sent back a thumbs up. It wasn't deep, it didn't have to be. Sometimes, survival looks like quiet alignment. On Friday, I received an unexpected email. Subject line, "Regarding your brother, Ethan Avery." It was from Bell & Whitaker's compliance team. "We understand your company played a strategic advisory role in our hiring review. A member of the Avery family has inquired about your involvement and alleged misconduct. We are conducting a formal ethics check." I didn't panic, because here's the thing. I hadn't broken a single rule. I didn't slander Ethan. I didn't interfere with due process. I simply offered internal feedback when asked, as a silent stakeholder with a private seat at that particular table. But I knew this was coming, not from the company, from him. The phone rang that night, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Ethan's voice came through, tight with barely suppressed rage. "You think you're better than us, than me, hiding behind your little startup and pulling strings in the dark? You're pathetic. You always have been." Pause. "I hope you know what you've started. This family might have ignored you, but you were never invisible to me. You were just small. That's worse." He hung up. I listened to it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because something in me felt oddly calm. For once, I didn't feel rage or sadness. I felt confirmation. Because when someone accuses you of pulling strings in the dark, it usually means you finally become powerful enough to cast shadows. On Saturday, I drove out to a storage unit I hadn't visited in years. Unit hash 27, same lock, same smell. Dust, stale cardboard, faint cedar from an old hope chest my grandmother gave me before she passed. I opened one of the boxes labeled personal. Inside, my college acceptance letter, still crisp. The broken violin I begged to keep, which my mom said wasn't practical. A journal from the year I almost didn't graduate because I took night shifts to pay for rent. A birthday card from Rachel, my aunt. "I see you, I always have." At the very bottom, a newspaper clipping, Legacy Partners announces Avery and Company Grant Fund. My father's photo stood next to Ethan's. The caption read, "Investing in the next generation of leaders." I had applied to that same fund, under a different name. I didn't even get a reply. I folded the clipping in half, then into quarters, then I tossed it back into the box. That's the thing about legacy. It can be rewritten. But first, you have to bury the draft. The next morning, I sent an email to Bell and Whitaker's compliance officer. I understand you're investigating a possible conflict. I have attached a timeline of my involvement, complete with board documentation and voting history. At no point did I overreach my capacity or violate advisory ethics. My feedback was solicited by your team. I hit send, then walked into the living room, made tea, and opened my blinds. The light hit different that day. The compliance investigation wrapped quietly. No headlines, no scandal, just a crisp 2-line email. We find no breach of ethics or advisory overreach. We consider this matter closed. Thank you for your transparency. I forwarded it to no one. Ethan would know. That was enough. A week passed. Then 10 days. The silence from my parents wasn't surprising. They never reached out after conflict, not to resolve, only to reset. That was their version of healing. Ignore it long enough and hope the cracks forget how they got there. But on the 11th day, something shifted. I got a call. Not from them, but from Alicia. "I wasn't sure if you'd pick up," she said softly. "I almost didn't." "I wouldn't blame you." There was a pause. Then she added, "He's spiraling, Lauren. I mean, really. I think he expected you to fold, not win." I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the untouched coffee I'd poured an hour ago. "You knew what he was doing," I said. "I suspected, but you have to understand, Ethan lives in a world where he's never been told no. Even when he fails, someone's always there to cushion it. You cut the net." I didn't respond. She continued, "Look, I'm not calling to make peace. I'm not trying to play both sides. I'm calling because you need to know. They're rewriting the story already." I knew exactly what she meant. "They're saying I sabotaged him," I said. "They're saying you embarrassed the family, that you made it personal. Your dad said you were acting out because you've always felt second best." I let out a low laugh. "Always felt? Try consistently treated." She sighed. "I know." That night, I opened the Thanksgiving receipts folder again. Not to weaponize it. To remind myself I wasn't crazy. Inside was a photo from 3 years ago. Ethan's engagement party. My name wasn't on the invitation. I found out through a Facebook post. I'd driven 3 hours with a gift anyway. They made me sit at the bar with the caterers, told me it was overflow seating. Later, Mom whispered, "Don't make a scene, Lauren. This is Ethan's moment." His moments never ended. The next morning, I got a letter, a real one, postmarked, handwritten, the script familiar. It was from my mother. "Lauren, we heard about the Bell situation. We're sorry you felt excluded on Thanksgiving. That was never our intention. Ethan is going through a rough time, and your choices have made it harder. Please understand that we're doing our best to hold this family together. We would like to move forward as a family, but only if you're willing to let go of this hostility." Hostility. I folded the letter. Not because I was done reading, but because I knew exactly what it meant. They weren't asking me to reconcile. They were asking me to return to the version of myself they could control. 2 nights later, I had dinner with Rachel. We met at a small bistro near the edge of town. No reservations, no performance, just wine poured generously and a corner booth that felt like it belonged to people who knew how to survive disappointment. She arrived in her signature knit shawl, eyes kind but sharp. "I heard from your mom," she said before the menus even arrived. "She told me you were making things difficult." I smiled, tight. "You mean standing up for myself?" She didn't use those words. "Of course not." She sipped her wine, then looked me square in the face. "You know," she said, "the only reason I stopped going to Thanksgiving was because I got tired of being the cautionary tale, the one who didn't marry well. The one who chose art over something useful. Sound familiar?" Painfully. "But the thing is," she added, "people like us, people they can't box in, we only become dangerous when we stop explaining ourselves." I stared at her. What if I don't want to be dangerous? I asked quietly. What if I just wanted a seat at the damn table? She leaned forward. You built the table, Lauren. You just haven't invited yourself to sit yet. After dinner, I drove home in the dark. The highway was quiet. My mind wasn't. I thought about all the things I hadn't said to my parents, all the restraint I'd wrapped myself in like armor, all the times I mistook survival for peace. And somewhere between exit 12 and my street, I made a decision. I wasn't going back. Not for the holidays. Not for apologies half-wrapped in guilt. Not for the illusion of family that came with conditions. I didn't need closure from people committed to misunderstanding me. What I needed was clarity and action. The next morning, I drafted a memo. Short, precise. Effective January 1st, our company will be formalizing a private foundation under our new corporate entity, Avery West. My surname. Not theirs. Mine, reclaimed and reshaped. The foundation would support underfunded women-led startups. No press kits, just impact. And for the first time, I attached my full name to the official documents. Lauren Avery. No asterisk, no apologies. The email came on a Tuesday. Subject line, Urgent Executive Advisory Request. At first glance, it looked like any other query routed through my assistant. But the sender wasn't just anyone. It was a managing partner at a legacy firm on the East Coast, one that happened to oversee major investments in education tech, real estate portfolios, and, quietly, Avery and Company, my father's firm. I opened it, slowly. Miss Avery, we understand you've recently finalized your transition into the West Group and are preparing for Q1 capital reallocation. A matter has surfaced that may require your discretion. One of our portfolio firms is under review for board misrepresentation. Your prior proximity to the family foundation may intersect with this. I reread it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. Dad's empire had cracks, and someone just handed me the flashlight. That night, I got a second message, this time a text, from my father. The first in over 6 months. Lauren, we need to speak. In person. No, how are you? No, I miss you. Just a summons, like I was still part of the machine. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Rachel. You knew, didn't you? I asked. She didn't pretend. I knew the cracks were there. I didn't know they'd show this soon. I exhaled into the silence. She continued. If you go, go on your terms. What does that mean? Wear something sharp and don't bring dessert. The next morning, I arrived at my parents' house at 9 a.m. on the dot. No holiday, no invitation, no ceremony. Just me, a black coat, a leather folder under my arm. Mom opened the door. Her eyes blinked like she wasn't sure if I was real. Oh, she said, mouth halfway into a smile. You came. I did. Your father's in the study. She didn't hug me. She didn't even offer coffee. But she stepped aside. Progress. The study smelled like oak and stale air. Dad was sitting behind the same desk he'd sat at my entire life, except now his posture had changed. He looked smaller, not in stature, in certainty. He gestured to the chair across from him. I didn't sit. You wanted to talk? I said. He nodded once. There's been some scrutiny over the foundation, over the way we've handled certain documents, some tied to Ethan's name, some retroactive filings that mention yours. I never signed anything. He hesitated. No, but your name was included, for optics. I laughed, short, sharp. You forged me into your legacy, without my consent. It's more complicated than that. No, I said, it's exactly that. He rubbed his temples. I didn't call you here to fight. Then what did you call me for? Damage control? A favor? You made it clear I wasn't part of this family unless I stayed quiet and grateful. His mouth opened, then closed. I dropped the folder onto his desk. Inside is a copy of every email, every receipt, every piece of evidence showing I've built my own entity, legally and financially separate from the Avery name. He flipped it open. I leaned in. And starting next month, I'll be reallocating my advisory capital. That includes dissolving any cross-affiliated shares between your firm and any of my strategic partners. His jaw tightened. You'd do that? To your own family? You already did it to me, I said. I'm just formalizing it. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then, what do you want? Nothing, I said. That was the most honest thing I'd said to him in years. I came to tell you this in person, because I don't need you confused about where we stand. I'm not looking for revenge. I'm not angry. I'm done. He looked at me like I'd changed languages mid-sentence. And maybe I had. As I turned to leave, he said something I didn't expect. You were always sharper than Ethan, but harder to control. I paused at the door. Then you should have let me lead. And I walked out. Back home, I made tea. I turned my phone off. I didn't need to watch the fallout. I didn't need to win louder. I just needed to stop playing by their rules. 2 days later, I received a package. No note, just a small unmarked envelope. Inside, a photo. Thanksgiving. Years ago. Me, maybe 15, in the corner of the family table. A paper plate, a plastic fork. The back had one sentence scribbled in fading ink. We see it now. There was no name. But the handwriting was my mother's. The invitation came in a sleek black envelope with embossed silver foil. Nothing flashy, just enough weight to suggest importance. Annual Winter Philanthropy Gala hosted by the West Group, a formal night. Suits, gowns, cameras. The kind of event my parents used to dream about being invited to, back when they believed legacy could be bought in brick and framed in boardrooms. This time, I wasn't just invited. I was the host. My team had spent weeks preparing. It wasn't just a charity dinner, it was the official launch of the Avery West Foundation, my private initiative for supporting women-led ventures in underrepresented regions. Quiet capital, real power. I'd kept my name off the press releases. I wanted their reactions live. It wasn't about spectacle, it was about moment. And moments, when crafted carefully, say what decades of begging never could. The ballroom shimmered with soft light and polished reputation. Every table had been set with navy linens and handwritten place cards. The podium stood beneath a screen, looping muted highlights of the foundation's early work. My speech was scheduled for 8:15 p.m. At 7:48, I saw them. Dad, Mom, Ethan. They didn't see me at first. They stood near the champagne bar, stiff and overdressed. Ethan was speaking, animated, likely networking. Mom clutched her purse like it was armor. Dad looked for someone to impress. They didn't know who owned the room yet. I approached them with practiced ease, my heels silent, my spine straight. Lauren? Mom blinked. We didn't realize you'd be here. I tilted my head. You thought I wouldn't attend my own event? A pause. Just long enough to crack their confidence. Dad recovered first. We were invited by a colleague, said the West Foundation was gaining traction. I smiled. That's generous of them. I assume they didn't tell you who West is? Ethan's brow creased. Wait, West as in my legal name? I said. Changed it over a year ago. Dropped the rest. Mom's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Dad stepped forward. Lauren, if this is your work, then congratulations. But why hide it? I looked at him, calm. Because I knew you wouldn't respect it unless you thought someone else built it. At 8:13, I walked toward the podium. The MC tapped the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host, founder, and CEO, Lauren West. Spotlight. Silence. Then a ripple of polite applause. I stood there for a second, letting it land. Then I spoke. I grew up being told that legacy was something passed down, that it lived in last names and company plaques and holiday speeches made around perfectly set tables. But legacy isn't inherited. It's chosen. It's earned. And for some of us, it's rebuilt from scratch. I let the words hang. You don't have to come from power to hold it. You don't have to be seen to make an impact. You just have to keep building until the people who ignored you have no choice but to sit in the rooms you created. In the second row, I saw Ethan's face tighten. I didn't flinch. I created the Avery West Foundation for women like me, the overlooked, the underestimated, the ones told to sit at the dog table and be grateful for scraps. We don't need charity. We need doors. I took a breath. Not from nerves, but from the weight of finally saying it all aloud. Tonight isn't about me. It's about who comes next. And trust me, they'll never have to ask permission to sit at the table. Applause erupted, but I didn't smile. Not yet. Because in the far corner I saw Mom reach for Dad's hand, like she needed grounding. Ethan stood frozen, mid-clap, unsure what the rules were now. For the first time in their lives, they didn't have the language to define me. Backstage, Maya handed me a glass of water. "You good?" I nodded. "I didn't say anything cruel." "No," she said. "You said everything that mattered." That night, I stayed long after the last guest left. I walked through the empty ballroom, heels in hand, floor slick with reflection. On a corner table, I saw 3 untouched name cards: Daniel Avery, Susan Avery, Ethan Avery. I picked them up, stacked them carefully, and left them on the edge of the podium. No ceremony, no bitterness, just truth. Have you ever stepped into a room where no one expected you to lead, and watched them shift when they realized you already had? It started with a voicemail from Ethan. I didn't answer. I never planned to, but I played it. Once. "I don't know what story you're telling out there, but this family's falling apart. Dad's losing partnerships, Mom barely speaks. You think this is a win? You think isolating yourself makes you powerful? You're not the hero in this. You're just bitter. Always have been." Click. No apology, no reflection, just blame. Dressed as concern. I deleted it. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. That was the shift. I didn't need to defend myself anymore, because they weren't even aiming at me. They were lashing at the void I left, and they were terrified I wasn't coming back. 2 days later, I received a letter. Hand-delivered. Thick ivory paper. My mother's handwriting on the envelope. Inside. "Lauren, your father is being removed from a legacy board. There are whispers about you having influence in this. I don't know if it's true. I hope it's not. Whatever happened between you and Ethan, you've made your point, but this family doesn't survive if we keep burning bridges. Help us fix it, please." It wasn't the letter that surprised me. It was the last word, please. The same woman who once told me I was lucky to be allowed to live at home rent-free while I paid the mortgage, now asking for my help. I folded the letter gently, set it in a drawer, then I emailed my attorney. No involvement, no statement, no interference. Because that was true. And if the system was finally collapsing, it had nothing to do with revenge. It just couldn't survive without me holding it up anymore. A week later, Alicia asked to meet. She chose a quiet coffee shop far from the city center. She looked different. Less polished, more grounded, like she'd stopped performing someone else's version of success. She sat down, eyes soft. No preamble. "I left him." I didn't react. She continued. "He wouldn't take responsibility. Not for anything. Not even what he said to you. He thinks the world owes him repair for damage he caused." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry I let it get that far." "You didn't let anything happen," I said quietly. "You just finally stopped pretending." She blinked and nodded. "I hope you're okay," she said. "I am." And I meant it. I got the idea for the mentorship circle over coffee with Maya. "I don't want this foundation to be performative," I said. "I want it to be hands-on. No panels, no speeches. Just chairs, real chairs, around real tables." A month later, I was sitting in a sunlit co-working loft, a dozen young founders around me, some wide-eyed, some sharp, all underestimated by someone. One woman, Kayla, stood out. She spoke with fire, but there was something behind it. That ache I knew too well. She'd built a small logistics tech company out of a garage. The pitch was good. The code was tighter than mine had ever been at her age. But what struck me most was how she carried herself, like she was still waiting for someone to say, "You belong." After the session, she lingered. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Were you ever scared they were right? That maybe you didn't deserve a seat at the table?" I smiled. "Not the soft kind, the kind that knows." "All the time," I said, "until I realized the table was theirs, and I could build my own." I pulled out the chair beside me. "Sit, you don't need permission." She did. And something settled inside me I didn't know I was still carrying. I haven't spoken to my father since the gala. He sent a message once. No subject line. Just a single sentence. "Your mother still hopes you'll come home for Christmas." But I am home. It just doesn't look like theirs. I still have that photo. The one from the early Thanksgiving. Me at the dog table, paper napkin, plastic fork. I keep it pinned on a board above my desk. Not for anger, not for shame, for scale. To remind myself how far I've come, and how far I'll keep going. Not out of spite, but out of precision. I don't want a seat at their table anymore. I built my own. And I bring chairs for others. In the end, I didn't win because I got revenge. I won because I stopped needing permission to exist. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight back, but to outgrow the war entirely. I didn't take my seat at their table. I built my own, and made sure others never had to beg for a chair. Maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you're there now, waiting to be seen, to be valued, to be enough. But what if you already are? What if you stopped asking and just became? If this story touched something in you, tell me, what part hit hardest? Where are you watching from? And if it didn't land, I'd love to hear why. Let's talk in the comments. If this story resonated with your heart, please hit subscribe to follow more stories that speak truth, strength, and second chances.